Welcome back to the Jungle Fever podcast. Me and Aiden decided to match today. We've both
Look at
got
that.
red
Almost.
on, maybe to signify no playoffs for elimination. And we're both repping playoff teams. I've got the Buckeyes
Yep.
on. He's got the Hoosiers.
This
Indiana
feels like
came out.
stolen valor. This feels like stolen valor. I picked it up at when they played Washington last year for College Game Day. I went up and covered that game, and I was like, "Yeah, win in Rome. This is a cool shirt. Like I can remember it
Sure.
by." And then all of a sudden, they messed around and made the playoffs in back-to-back years. So
Yeah.
I'm rocking it.
Well, a team that's missed the playoffs now in 3 straight years is the Cincinnati Bengals after what was a cold and miserable Sunday afternoon in Cincinnati. 6 degrees, I think, was the high. They didn't even bother to clear the snow off the seats, and
I
for
got
good
something to
reason.
say about that in a little bit. We
Oh,
can
oh,
we
we
can talk
got
about the
plenty to
game.
say
Yeah.
because it turns out waiting to record until Tuesday proved to be a little bit of a blessing in disguise. So, because a certain article came out just about, I don't know, 3 or so hours ago that is very interesting from a guy in Paul Denner Jr. who is very plugged in, knows his stuff, always does good work. Shout out, Paul. Um, but he's got some very interesting takes on where this offseason is headed. And we'll get to that in just a second. Don't worry. We got plenty of that coming later. First off, we have to discuss what was a game in Paycor Stadium on Saturday or on Sunday night. Just, I think I'm struggling to remember the last time the Bengals were shut out. I want to say it's 2019 at some point in that just awful season where the Bengals won 2 games. Um, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I don't believe they've been shut out in the Joe Burrow era. It's been a long time. Let's just put it that way. Obviously, I think the big story offensively was the Bengals had 4 drives that went inside the Ravens' 30-yard line. Those drives ended like this: 2 interceptions, a turnover on downs, and a sack that forced the Bengals out of field goal range and into a punt. So, yeah, that is pretty damning. And again, the defense. We'll get to that in a second because there was some good and there was obviously some bad, but we'll break down the offense first because obviously the zero on the scoreboard is pretty indicative, right? And Joe Burrow said it after the game, and I agree with him that you don't win a lot of games in the NFL when Joe Burrow quarterbacks like that. And yeah, he had a rough game, right? Made some decisions that I don't think were characteristic, put it that way. The first interception isn't really his fault. It's on Jamar. You got to make that catch,
It's
in
a
my
bad
opinion.
ball, Ethan.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
he could
it's
have put
thrown
it.
too high. I mean,
It is a little
Jamar
bit
does get
high.
his hands on it, and Jamar's Jamar.
Yeah,
But given the weather and everything, and how cold it is, how difficult it is to catch, that's got to be on the numbers.
yeah, and then there's no question about the second one. That's just a panic decision, which is something we're not used to seeing from him, right? We're used to seeing him shake things and then be the cooler head. And that time, just he's got a couple Ravens in his face, tried to make a play, and the Ravens do it, ends up being a pick six. So, again, just really, I think that's where you have to pinpoint the offensive struggles. Joe just didn't play very well. I think that's really the
Yep.
long and short. They couldn't really run the ball at a very high level. The offensive line kind of had it, it had been on a pretty good run recently. It kind of came back down to earth a little bit in this game. The Ravens did get some key pieces back, and that helped them big time defensively. But you know, just some fundamental mistakes really that a team in week 15, I don't care if you won 0 games, just shouldn't be making.
Yeah. So the last time that the Bengals were shut out, 2017 season opener against Joe Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, that game sucked. I remember that game.
But yeah, I mean, this is probably not probably. This is Joe Burrow's worst game as a starter, I think, in the NFL. He even said that himself. And I think we've been using this word a lot, but I think this kind of described the whole Bengals team on Sunday. It just felt apathetic. It just felt like they were out there, kind of going through the motions. Like it was what it was. Even Ravens players after the game said that they felt like they didn't have any fight. It didn't look like anybody had any fight. So I don't I don't blame Ravens players for saying that at all. Jamar, good game in garbage time, I guess. 10 catches, 132 yards. Burrow just like you said, missed throws. He had a deep touchdown to Andre Yoshivas pretty early on in the game that he just underthrows. I would argue that the two picks he throws were probably both his fault. And he, like you said, you don't win games with your quarterback playing like that. I don't care who it is. And especially with this team and its margin of error being so low, you can't do it. I thought, like you said, the defense played pretty solid. The drive to end the second or the first half was a joke. They just marched right down the field and got points right before the half, and that it felt insurmountable at that point. But honestly, like I don't really want to focus too much on the game, if that makes
The
any sense.
crazy thing is, I believe in Bengals history, the Ravens ran 40 plays.
Hmm.
Lamar Jackson threw 12 passes. Like the Ravens were not the Bengals offense was on the field for the majority of this game, and they scored 0 points. Right.
Hmm.
And again, what I talked about in the beginning with the four drives, let's say things flip, you score touchdowns, all four of those drives, all of a sudden this game's 28-24. We're talking a very different tone right now. But, you know, it is a kind of wild just bad day at the office, really. And that just, you can't afford bad days at the office when you're 4-9 trying to sneak in the back door of the postseason, which obviously we touched on in the beginning. We'll confirm it again now. The Bengals will not be going to the postseason for the third year in a row, which is just completely inexcusable. We're obviously, as you could probably tell, going to get a little bit deeper into that later into this episode. But again, you have a top five quarterback, a top five wide receiver. You can make arguments for both of those guys being top one in their spots. And the fact that you're not in the postseason 3 years in a row, and I get Burrow's been banged up in 2 of the 3 years. I don't care. I think that the standard being this low is embarrassing. But I'm gonna pause because we're gonna come back to that conversation later on in this episode. I thought the defense played all right, with the exception of that drive. Right, that drive at the end of the first half was just bad. Geno Stone, I don't know what he's doing on that long touchdown to Zay Flowers. He shouldn't be in a uniform with stripes next year. Um, I will there are not a lot of positive things to talk about this episode, but let's touch on a couple of them. This edge duo again has really just come along really nicely. Miles Murphy, 2 sacks. Really good game again from him. We've been talking about consistency with this guy, and finally here over the last month, for the first time in his career, you're seeing it. And this is big. The Bengals need this sort of development. So Miles Murphy, big check mark. I think Osai is a guy they should absolutely be looking to retain this offseason. They won't because check, look who his agent is. But he's been solid as well. Demetrius Knight with 2 sacks. He made some big plays throughout the course of this game. Jordan Battle with yet another interception. He's had his mistakes when it comes to tackling this year, but you can't deny he's been a ball hawk. I believe that's 5 interceptions on the year for Jordan Battle. So again, that's a good number for any safety. That's kind of it positives wise. Turner again continues to be very solid. He was banged up through it. Should have had a pick.
Hit him in the
Um,
face mask.
hit him straight in the face. And that would have taken the touchdown away from Baltimore at the end, that late drive in the first half. But again, with the exception of that, he made a couple other little mistakes, but I'm willing to cut him some slack. He's probably the only player on this defense that's allowed a little bit of slack this year. Dax Hill, solid again, right? He's another guy I think the Bengals should be looking to retain long term because he's not at the bottom. Right? That's kind of, and
Oh
it's
my God.
crazy that that's the standard, but that's what you're looking for at this point, right? He's not complete bottom of the barrel. Is he elite? No. But is he somewhere in the middle, maybe even closer to the top than the bottom?
Is he not embarrassingly bad? Yes,
There it
okay.
is.
Then yeah, he could play on our
He
defense.
can
That's
stick around, right?
yeah, that's how
Because
it is.
bad news, there are a couple pretty embarrassing spots on this
And
defense.
if you are embarrassingly bad, it doesn't matter. Your job is safe. You can keep
Yep.
playing. Stone, like, sure, keep rolling out there. You had
Yep.
2 good games. That washes away the other 12 games that you've played this year
Mhm.
where you look like a
We
toddler.
pay you we pay you a little bit more money than everybody else, so you get to stay on the field, right?
I thought it was Demetrius Knight's best day as a pro.
Mhm.
Like you said, Miles Murphy continues to flash, which is nice to see. And DJ Turner had a interception hit off his face mask that I didn't catch. That was kind of my takeaway of the defense. I mean,
Yeah.
They
They
were
weren't on the field very
they
much at
didn't have to
all.
do a whole lot
They just weren't on the
because
field.
yeah.
They
So
only really
that's
they
like
only gave up 17 points, right? The pick six took that away, right?
yeah. So people post game were making fun of Zach Taylor for saying that the defense only gave up 3 points in the second half. They did. Like the 10 points they scored in the second half, seven of them came off the Joe Burrow pick six. I don't understand people's
Yeah.
brains don't work, especially when they're angry. But I'm also angry, so we can.
Mm. And I mean, again, and some of the issues with picking up screens on that first touchdown, like they've had issues with that all year. Popped up again. It was a third and long again. So, just consistency with the same issues. I think I said this last week, and I'm probably going to keep saying it. Definition of insanity. What is it again? Keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Well, that's kind of what we're doing everywhere, right? Let's get into the fun part of this episode. Let's get into the fun part, right? Because that game is what it is. 24 nothing. Bengals are eliminated. Last three coming up here are Miami next week, then Arizona and Cleveland at home to finish up the year. I think all three of those teams. I think two of them are done. I don't know if Miami's officially eliminated after last night losing to Pittsburgh.
I think
I
they are.
think Okay, so three completely meaningless games that the Bengals will find a way to win two of them and completely kill the draft stock. You just know it's coming. You can smell it, right? Um, so let's talk about ineptitude and complacency. Two words of the day. There you go. So Paul Denner Jr. released an article earlier this morning that said that among a number of things, let's just hit on the key points because there's a lot. This is a long article. I would encourage you all that are listening or watching to read this yourselves. Number one, Duke Tobin is viewed on the same level as the Brown and Blackburn family. And while there is external pressure on his position, there is zero internal pressure on his position. He is almost untouchable. Let's just little timeout pause. Um, well, you know,
Is it sad
I
that I'm not surprised by that
no,
information?
I wasn't. I wasn't. Because again, the standard is in the flooring. Everybody that's involved right now with this team, bought themselves eternal grace by making it to a championship game. That is the sad part about it. The Bengals put together what was a Cinderella run, right? They came up just short, and we all love 2021. It'll always have a special place in a lot of people's hearts, right? And it was great. No taking away from that year because it was an awesome year, right? Even the next year, 22 was awesome. They won 10 straight football games. They almost made it back, right? But since those 2 years, they have accepted mediocrity. 3 years in a row, they've accepted mediocrity. And guess what? You want to know the second point of that article? Zach Taylor's job is not in very much jeopardy. Because guess what? After that 2022 AFC Championship, or excuse me, the 2023 AFC Championship game that they lost in Kansas City, right? Very close, very tight game. They were right there, lost it at the end. Zach Taylor signed another 5-year extension. So he signed an extension that was very publicized after the Super Bowl, right? Which everybody was like, okay, fair enough, right? He took him to the Super Bowl, whatever. After the AFC Championship game, this is according to Paul Denner Jr., he signed another 5-year extension. So it just replaced the old contract. And two interesting caveats with this. Number one, it's really hard to find details about this contract. Like you can't, like a lot of these NFL guys, you can just like you do a couple searches, you go on the right places, you can find pretty much every detail about a lot of NFL coach contracts. It is not that simple with this organization and with this head coach. Number two, a lot of people seem to have the impression that Zach Taylor had 1 year left on his deal coming into next year. It's 2 years. That's 2 years of dead money that the Bengals would have to pay him, which I know, right? The checkbook's going to have to come out.
Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen.
So, Aiden, I'm going to ask you this question because I've been thinking about I had a drive from West Virginia today. I was thinking about it most of the drive up. If they go into next season with no front office slash staffing changes, maybe a coach here and there, right? Nothing major. Let's just say that. Nothing major. What is your interest level as a fan in the 2026 version of the Bengals? If not, and they can make any change they want, they could draft however you want. But if there's no front office or coaching major front office or coaching changes, what's your interest level for next year?
Um, Interesting. My my interest level, just knowing myself, is probably still somewhat high, just because
Mhm.
I am a fan and I will root for this team no matter what. Unfortunately, that's kind of where we are. So I will be watching the games. My expectation and my hope for the team would be zero. Again, because if we retain the big three, we can call them. We always talk about Burrow, Chase, and Higgins being the big three. The big three in the organization right now is Al Gold. Oh my gosh, Al Golden, Duke Tobin, and Zach Taylor. It seems like all three of those guys are going to be back for next year. It is just so incredibly mind-numbing. It is just it doesn't make any sense. And when you have a quarterback who voices his frustrations about how things have been operating here recently, because that's what that was. That Zach or that Joe Burrow press conference was a shot at the front office. And you just decide to roll it back just for another year. They're just accepting what they are. Since 2020, there's 14 teams with a negative point differential.
Just saw
This
this like
this
two
is the
seconds ago.
league. This is the league that the Bengals are in. The Panthers, the Titans, the Giants, the Raiders, the Jets, the Browns. The list goes on with
Any of those
Falcons.
other teams even sniff playoff success
No,
during that time?
no. So we've just
Which makes it
accepted.
more hilarious.
Yeah. This is my thing too with that contract extension. It happened in silence. It happened without anybody knowing, and that's just how this front office operates. Duke Tobin does one press conference a year, a single media availability, and it's before the draft, and it's because he's a coward and he does not want to answer legitimate questions that people have for this organization. He hides behind Zach Taylor and he hides behind this team and he shows up one time a year. And it is so incredibly dumb because then the national media can sit there and run and spin whatever stories they want.
Oh,
No one's there. No one's there
yesterday
to
was a
take
fun
them.
day.
And it's like you guys can control the narrative by coming out there and voicing some kind of plan for the future, but it doesn't seem like they do have one, to be totally honest with
I
you.
was
So
just
I
about to
don't
say
know.
I'd be
I
shocked if there was a plan.
I don't
Shocked.
know what you want them to say. I just want them to stand up there and actually take accountability for what they're doing, which is running this franchise into the ground and running Joe Burrow into the ground.
I've said this to like you and like buddies before. I've never been as sure of something in the NFL, and I hate that fact I'm about to say this, that Joe Burrow will, he'll stay here. He just got paid. I don't like he's not getting traded. That was speculation because of those comments last week. He's not going anywhere now, but in the future. Joe Burrow wins a Super Bowl with another franchise. I've never been as confident in something in my life. I like we know how good he is here. He's not going to get this. You give this guy support, right? You give him a defense that can get more than a stop a game. You give him an offensive line, not this year, but an offensive line that can block for and protect him, right? And he's going to do just fine. He's going to win a lot of games. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up, Stafford hangs it up in a year or two in LA and they come knocking or calling and he goes there and he wins multiple rings, right? Because that's a front office that has their SHIT in order, right? They have their ducks in a row. And you have a front office in Cincinnati that's the exact opposite. You have no clear figurehead. You have no accountability. Does the word accountability even exist in this organization? And that goes from top to bottom. Like, there's no accountability. And, like, I think that one of maybe a few people in this organization that does possess accountability is Joe Burrow. He goes up there and he's another guy that just takes Duke Tobin's shots for him because they send him to the podium 3 times a week, right? Zach Taylor, I don't envy his position very much at all because he's got to go to the podium 3 times a week and deal with all the questions that would be asked Duke Tobin. You know, he comes, you hear from Duke Tobin twice a year. You hear from him at the Mock Turtle Soup Day and you hear from him at the Combine. That's it. Those are the only 2 times you'll even see him. Like, is he even real? Like, I don't. He just and the Bengals once again smallest scouting department in the NFL, smallest network in the NFL, right? Four pro scouts. You know how laughable that is? Four scouts for a
I
professional organization.
I think the team has showed you who they are time and time and time and time and time and time and
And
time
the
and
and the
time
worst
again.
part, the worst part about it is it's a rerun. We saw this happen with Carson Palmer. We saw this happen with Andy Dalton. Now, obviously, Dalton isn't quite on the same tier as Burrow or even Palmer, but like it's the same issues. And I said this in a group chat earlier. All of this is making me tip my cap more to Marvin Lewis, which is I can't believe I'm saying that. But you think about the consistency. I get again, he didn't get it done in January. Everybody knows it, right? He didn't win the playoff games. So be it, right? But the fact that he had this team in the playoffs 5 years in a row, that's a really look. It
No,
looks
it,
it
it
looks unbelievably impressive now, doesn't it? Right?
yeah.
I mean, and the fact that he was able to churn out good defenses and good offenses in the same year in this economy with this front office, like
Yeah.
pretty
And so the
good.
national media always makes jokes all the time about this Bengals team, and they're not really jokes anymore. They're just kind of
They're not.
truth, I think. Like I said before, they show you who they are time and time again. Think about this Sunday. I'm going back to this. Think about this Sunday. Your team is 4-9. You have
Mhm.
like a 3% chance to make the playoffs. It's basically done. The temperature feels like is in the negative degrees. It just snowed outside, and your front office and your team doesn't even take the time to blow off the snow off the seats for all those fans who are going out there and freezing their butts out to watch you guys lose 24-0 to the Baltimore Ravens. It's a freaking joke. Those people spend money and are out there to support you all, and you don't even give them the time of day to blow off the seats. And it seems so like minuscule for some people to think about. I think it's a big deal because it shows you how little they care. They don't care about what's going on, and it's
Nope.
that's the most frustrating part is it feels like at times fans and people outside of the organization care more about winning football games than some of these front office members
Well,
do.
you know what they care about, and I've said this a few times. You know what they care about? They care about this. I've got my wallet next to me. This is what they care about. They don't care about anything else. They care about the dollar sign. And that's why here's my thing. If nothing changes, fans need to not show up next year. I read a great article from the New York Post today about the Giants and how that front office noticed when people stopped showing up, right? Because the Giants, they've had plenty of their own issues, right, with mediocrity and not succeeding. But the Giants have been willing to spend money and trade and make front office moves, right? You can blame Joe Schoen and you can gripe with what he's done all you want. You can't say he hasn't tried, right? There's a lack of trying with this front office. You have to like any sort of trade is like, oh my God, they made a trade? Like it shouldn't be groundbreaking to try and improve your team in season. They don't even think about extending contracts in season. How dare they? Right? We need all focus on the 4-10 football team. Like, let's like,
Look at
you
what the
know,
Detroit Lions are doing. The
mm,
Detroit Lions and Brad Holmes in that front office is extending guys A before they need to. That's a foreign concept to the Cincinnati Bengals team. We wait to the last possible second to when they're the most expensive and they have the most leverage and they're the most difficult to deal with. That's when we're going to go ahead and try and sign these people. The Lions don't. They go out in front of it, so they're cheaper. They get out ahead of it, and guess what? The market looks a lot better 2 years from then. And it's like, oh, that's a pretty good deal for Panay Sewell. That's a pretty good deal for Hutch. Yeah, at the time you might be paying them top dollar, but as the market continues to grow and evolve, guys get more expensive. And so they're taking this proactive approach, and that's why I think the Lions are able to keep a lot
proactive.
of
That's another word that just does not exist in this front office.
that's why I think the Lions are able to keep a lot of this talented people on their roster in these situations. And
Agreed.
it's like the a lot of you could look at there's countless examples of teams doing this. Obviously, the Eagles are kind of like the hallmark of the front offices in the NFL, but they just run circles around this Bengals team. It's unreal.
It's this front office is 32 out of 32. And I'm not like, I don't even think there's an argument, really. And the funniest part is there have been other teams in the NFL that have been mediocre, right, for years, decades even. Look at the other team in New York, right? The Jets haven't made the playoffs since 2012, but at least they've tried, right? At least they've made a couple of moves, right? Yeah, they've swung and missed on a lot of them. In fact, most of them. But you can't fault the Jets for not trying. This front office doesn't even try. Like
Yeah.
they don't. It's mistake after mistake after, and it's not even mistakes. It's just like not even trying. Like they don't even do it. They don't even try to make a mistake or a success. It's just, oh well, we had the league's worst defense last year. Let's bring in a third string nose tackle. That'll fix everything. And let's bring in Al Golden. He'll come in and he'll solve every problem this defense had from last year, right? And then you look at what the Colts have done defensively this year, and you look at what the Bengals have done defensively this year, and Lou Anarumo, it was a situation that he had to part ways regardless, but it's like, maybe Lou Anarumo wasn't the biggest issue. Maybe it was the fact that this defense just didn't have a lot of talent. And whose fault is that, by the way? It's the front office's fault because they can't draft for crap. So,
And I think, sorry, not to cut you off.
no,
I think the
I was
worst
done.
part about this whole conversation as well is like players recognize this. No
Mm,
free agents, notable free agents really want to come to Cincinnati. Not that we would make any competitive offers to them, but it seems like when you have a quarterback is the hardest position in the NFL to figure out. You have top three quarterback in the NFL. You have the pieces to go make a run. Nobody wants to join us. I wonder why. Like it happened with Carlos Dunlap in 2017. He tweeted something in 2017. I have it pulled up here. I don't see the plan, but guess that's not my role too either. That was back in
nine
2017.
nine
Hey,
years
guess
ago.
what? Guess what? We're still here. Jamar Chase after the game, he said if it was up to him, he would make some changes, but that's not his job. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Players recognize it.
I
Zach
don't.
Moss, who got his contract
mm,
restructured after a freak accident injury, the Bengals front office actually did him a favor in helping him out and getting him guaranteed money. He said it's the worst organization he's ever been a part of. He said it's the worst organization in professional sports. Like players recognize this. And I don't think it's gonna change. I worry about Jamar's mental health. He's too honest at times. He might say something and it might get him in
I
trouble.
wouldn't blame him. That's the funniest
No.
part. I wouldn't blame him. And I'm glad you brought up that external vision, right? Because you could gripe to the front office about not signing players, but if Duke Tobin or Zach Taylor gives a phone call to, I don't know who some of the big free agents are this year, but if they give a phone call to let's say a big defensive tackle they want to bring in, right? Trying to get a big body on the inside to help this defensive. Hey man, we're looking to bring you in, but we're going to offer you 3 years, 30 million. He laughs in your face and they hang up the call. And then, not even forget the money, they're going to hang up the call because their buddy who played for the Bengals a few years ago is going to be like, yeah, that place sucked. I hated it. They don't treat anybody right and they're not trying to win. That report, you can gripe about that report card that they do in the offseason with the grades and all that. Bengals consistently bottom five. Consistently bottom five. And it's such fixable stuff too. Like it's not treating players' families right. It's not like not improving the food that the players get. Like it's such
In
simple
care.
crap. Like it's mind numbing. And truly, the end of the day, I'm gonna go back to it because I think it's true. If there are no changes made, number one, there should be empty seats. And they're on the road this week, but there should be empty seats against Arizona and against Cleveland. And if nothing changes, there needs to be empty seats week one next year. There has to be, or nothing will change because that's the only way that this front office will realize that something needs to change. It's what made them fire Marvin back in 2018 when no one was showing up late in that season because once again, they were just mediocre, right? Even in 2019, right? That's the craziest part about Zach sticking around is Zach Taylor probably would have been fired twice over by like almost every other franchise in the league. would probably have been gone after 2020 for a lot of franchises. Would probably have been gone after 2024 by a lot of franchises. And yet here we are 2 years later and he's still sticking around, right? And I think he's lost the locker room completely. And I think, that was the one thing that was kind of keeping him in charge, I suppose. And I just think I think there's no, and you mentioned that, like, of course I'll still follow them, right? I'll still, keep an eye, watch some games, be excited, but I'm not spending any money to go to a Bengals game next year if nothing changes. Why would
No,
you? There's
no.
no reason to. Even if I'm in Cincinnati, I will go to the banks and give the great people out there my hard-earned money instead of going to a cold, miserable game, paying $20 for a beer and watching my team lose 31 to 34.
You got to wipe your seat off from the snow
And I
as
gotta wipe
well.
my seat off from the rain or the
And
snow.
yeah, and they ran out of hot chocolate as well. So you're not warming up either.
Nope.
But you know whose seats they did blow off? The club seats. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that makes sense.
And that's really why nothing will change because those people won't cancel their tickets. So, it is what it is, right?
We could just
There's
drink our
just,
sorrows away at Holy Grail as we
mm,
lose 34 to 32.
yep, with a failed 2-point conversion at the end of the game because they just love heartbreak. Um,
Fun
I mean,
times,
I do.
dude. Fun times.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess we'll end this conversation with I think that article is true. That's the saddest part. Like, yeah, I do think there is still a chance that Zach gets fired. Like, I don't think it's a 0% that he's gone. Like, I think there is still a percent chance. Like, if they fall apart here these last 3 games, which is a possibility, even though Burrow is playing, which is really stupid, but whatever. Um, I yeah, he could be fired. If they get spanked, right? If they lose week 18 of the Browns at home, like if Shador throws for 303 on you, like, yeah, maybe that's the cue, right? But
You have
like,
too much optimism.
but even if Zach gets fired, like they're just going to bring in here are the two head coaches they'll bring in if Zach Taylor gets fired. They'll interview two people. You want to know the two people they'll interview? Dan Pitcher, who's the current OC, who I wouldn't even mind. I wouldn't hate that hire at all. But Dan Pitcher and Vance Joseph would be the two people they'd interview. They wouldn't even think about going outside their bubble, right? I say Vance Joseph because he used to be the Bengals defensive coordinator. They will not go outside their little bubble because that's the Brown family. They just live in their little bubble. Everything's,
Knowing the front office, they'd probably call Lou. Be like, hey Lou, do you want to come back?
and he would laugh and he
And
would
he
hang up
flips
the
the
phone.
bird.
Yeah. And I think that as Zach Taylor used that word in his press conference the other day, there's insulation between this front office and the outside world. And there are times where that is good. And then there are times where that is bad. This is the latter. And there is no, again, I keep going back to this word, there's no accountability. There's no acknowledgement of the fact that, yeah, we've missed the playoffs with top 3 players in multiple positions for 3 years in a row. That's really all there is to it. And if nothing changes, nothing will change. They will go 6-11 next year. It doesn't
It's one of my
matter who
favorite
it is.
quotes. It's one of my favorite quotes. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Yep,
It
that sums it
sounds
up.
stupid, but it's the truth. And
That
it's
sums it
sad.
up.
So,
Let's do
well,
some mock
unfortunately,
drafts next week.
yeah, sure. And we'll take a third round prospect at
No,
pick
no,
13.
we're doing not what the Bengals would do.
Oh,
We're gonna do
okay.
a mock draft of
Okay.
what we want, where we get actual
Well,
talent that can
Caleb
move up.
Downs, this plays for this team pretty good. I don't know. Is there
Peter
Shamar
Woods.
Stewart? There's Shamar Stewart in this draft that we could take. Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. There he is. Four and a half
I wouldn't
sacks
mind
on the
Peter
season.
Woods out of Clemson. We can get into that later, but
Peter Wood's a
anyway,
dog. Would love that. You talk about that defensive monster on the interior. I'm
we
all over
haven't had
this.
one in 9 years.
Will be the best since '97. Will
Yeah.
be the best since Gino, 100%. I said it in chats. He's legit. So, but the fact that we're having, and that's what we'll end with, it's December 16th. We're having mock draft conversations.
I'm so happy. that we can give up
And we
on
can end the
division
charade.
final.
Yeah, I'm happy to do
Yes.
that too.
Because I'm so tired of being like, well, if we win out and then they do this and then
Well,
that,
at the end of the day, somehow this awful team beat each division team once. So
that's
at least
because
there's a
this
couple.
division is freaking awful.
Oh, it's bad. Look, Pittsburgh got a nice win last night against Miami team that, once the temperature drops below freezing, they drop below terrible. Um, I imagine that Baltimore Pittsburgh game week 18 will be as long as both teams
When
take care
you're
of
in.
business tonight. However, Baltimore plays a New England team that really needs to win next week. So Pittsburgh probably going to win the division, but not a sure thing yet. So
The
we
Browns
will
are the
see.
Browns.
And then there's Cleveland, hanging out with us, hanging out with us
Hey,
down
we're
there.
just we're arm in arm right now with the
Yep,
Browns locked in.
hanging out. But they have another first round pick this year. So we'll see how they burn
They'll
that pick.
draft a defensive player or they'll draft an offensive lineman that won't pan out. That's their gripe always. So,
Or they'll draft another quarterback. Heisman Doza.
oh man,
Heisman Doza.
and the episode goes all full circle, Ethan. Look at
Yep.
that.
Back to the beginning. Back to the beginning. So, well, that'll wrap things up. Fun, enjoyable episode today. All smiles. We'll
Good day.
yeah, we'll be back next week. We'll see what the topic of rant is. Maybe we will actually do a little bit of mock drafting. I don't
I'm over
know.
talking about this team.
Yeah. Maybe we'll talk a little college football playoff. Who
There we go.
knows? So,
The Reds
it's
not
on
signing
us.
anybody. We can talk about that.
Yeah. Just change topics. We're just gonna change the name. Just the fever.
Because it's the same. It's the same. The Bengals and the Reds are the same.
Yep. Yep. And then FC Cincinnati just blows in the playoffs.
Man,
It's
just get out of here.
Brendan Sorsby's transferring.
Do you have
It's all,
anything nice, Ethan?
it's all over. Well, so is the Bengals season. But we'll talk more about it next week somehow. That'll do it for this edition of the Jungle Fever podcast for Aiden Crowley, beneath Sergeant. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next Monday.